Welcome everybody. In the two previous videos, I've showed you how to set up AspNetCore with Vite and Vue. In the second video, I showed you how to host it all in a Docker container. In this video, I'm going to show you how to host it behind a load balancer, having the Vite Vue application in a cloud bucket, and having the API still run in a Docker container. How do we set this all up? Well, before in the Docker container, we had the API and the Vue.js application living together. We want to separate them. So if you haven't watched those two videos, links are in the description, right? We have this production folder where we put our artifacts, which we then put in a Docker container. I have cleared it out. I've cleared out the dist folder and the bin folder where we've built our artifacts. So let's go ahead and recreate them. But actually, before we do this, we need to do a couple of changes. As I mentioned in the first episode, if you are going to split them out, it is best to follow a convention that you set for yourself, where you prefix all your controller routes with something like /API. You don't have to do this. You can do this by subdomains, or if both of them you expect them to live on the same domain, please do this. Go ahead and prefix your routes with /API and then controller name, right? You will, when we set up the load balancer, you're gonna see why this can be important, and again, you might see why this may not be important if your API is gonna live on a separate subdomain. And then if it lives on a subdomain, you may need to configure cores. But for our Vue.js application, what we're gonna do is in our hello world component, where we went for /test, this time we're going to go for /API/test, okay? Because we're on the same domain. So those are the two changes. Here we're going to go into the terminal, and I'm just going to, because I'm already in the Vite client directory, I'm going to go ahead and rebuild my artifacts. So npm run build. If you don't know where this comes from, check your package.json. It's one of the scripts defined here, right? So build gives us a dist folder. Let's just leave that there. We'll use it once everything is set up. So we got that. Let's go ahead and pop into vite.api. Here we will just republish our .NET API. So we are gonna have our bin folder with the publish folder, and here are our artifacts. So I want to go ahead, Control-C, Control-V them into the production, and now I want to rebuild my Docker container. For this, again, I'm just gonna go ahead and start up a correct version of WSL. I don't know which, basically, yeah, you can list the commands. I'm just looking for the flag, so it's gonna be -D. I can also do /list, where I will find out this specific WSL instance which contains the Docker setup that I had before. So wsl.exe-d Ubuntu, right? And this will bring me to the correct place. So my Docker file is in the root directory, so that's where I want to be. Again, if you just start up your WSL instance afresh, you need to make sure that Docker is running. So sudo service status all. That's my password. Let's see if Docker is running. I've tested this before I started the video, so Docker is running. Otherwise, you need to start Docker. Anyway, for all the previous information, go check the previous video, right? We're not gonna go over too much. Let's go ahead, sudo docker build current directory with whatever things I can't remember. So sudo docker images, so I can see the latest images that I've built. So it's gonna be this repository with this tag. So docker build this directory /latest, right? And this will have to be a -t for tag. Okay, so here we are, that's done. Again, I'm gonna list images. It's going to be this latest one that I've essentially built an hour ago. It's just rebuilt the same image for me. So if you've updated it, it's gonna build a new image for you. Regardless, this is what I want to push. So let's just go ahead, bring up the last command, and we'll just sudo docker publish. And I'm not in a .NET world. I want to push. Okay, so this basically means that our Docker image is now in Google Cloud. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at it. Again, I'm in my environment. You can look through this burger menu, although I think it is quite verbose. And I mean, you can pin these menus I'm gonna refrain from using it. What we're going to do is we're gonna press slash, or you can what's called, just use the search menu, and we can search for container, and we'll find container registry. Inside these images, we're gonna find our container that we've uploaded just now. Click on the container and we're just gonna run it. So we'll just press deploy and cloud run, same jazz as in the previous episode, but this is just gonna host our API. So yeah, Iowa.net. So take note of the region. The region is going to be important. So US Central 1. Advanced settings. One thing we need to do is change the port because we have it configured to 5000. And maximum number of instances. I'm just going to say 3 because I don't want to accidentally scale to like a gazillion. So allow all traffic. I'm just going to set this up like this because I'm going to delete it later. But generally, for whatever use case you have, read what specific configuration you need. Okay, let's go ahead and create this. So that took about a minute. Let's go ahead and grab the URL. We'll want to run something like this, API test, and there's our test result. Okay, so our API is up and running. Cool. If during the configuration we would have said don't allow public access, we would not be able to reach the cloud run through this domain. Only the internal services in our Google Cloud would be able to reach it. So if we expose the load balancer to the outside world, only through the load balancer can you reach this instance and this API endpoint. Although I'm selecting allow all access just so we can test this easier. Okay, so I can navigate it, I can see it working. Cool, we can proceed. Now that this is running, let's go ahead and again search for something else. This time we're going to search for buckets. You can search for cloud storage. Essentially, this is where cloud storage, right? Let's go ahead and create a bucket. And remember the region you've selected for your cloud run. We will call this vite client app. We will continue. Region. We will select region US Central 1, Iowa, so same region, and standard. And then the important thing here on the fourth step is prevent public access. We want to untick this. We will still have to take a step to allow public access, but this essentially stops you from allowing public access. Okay, the rest of it doesn't really matter too much. Just go ahead, press OK, and then create. Here's our empty bucket, right? Let's put some stuff into here. So let's upload files. I mean, I already navigated to the folder where I have my build artifacts in the dist directory. So AspNetCore Vite, this is the same thing that I have here, right? So I'm navigated to this dist folder here. So I'm going to grab the files here from the dist folder. I don't know if I can just drag and drop them, and also upload this folder. Usually you would use a gcloud command line tool to do this from your build pipeline or deployment pipeline, whatever you choose to use. So I mean, it's one command to sync two directories in Linux. So I mean, super easy. So yeah, once we have the files, what we want to do now is we want to make this bucket public. So you want to visit the domain and you want to pull stuff from this bucket. What we want to do is we want to go into permissions, and we want to add permissions. This will vary from how you basically configure this. We can call this configuration allow public access to a bucket between Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, and other providers. The amount of permissions you can do will vary. You have to type in all users and then select a role, cloud storage, and storage object viewer. This is just what you have to do in Google Cloud to allow all access. This will give you a couple of warnings, but there is the permission that we've just added. One more thing that we need to do is kind of say index.html is the default file that should be shown if you are navigating to the root of the bucket. So for this, we go outside, we take a look at the Vite client app, we press these three dots, and we edit website configuration, right? So Google infrastructure for the buckets kind of expects you to host static sites on it, right? Let's go ahead and say index.html here and save. Okay, Yeah, I'm not gonna go. If you want, you can try and see what's different if you go and unchange that setting later on. Go ahead and explore that. For now, just understand that you need to set that. We have our app in the bucket. We have our API in a Docker container running. Now we need a load balancer, something in the middle that's gonna have a domain attached to it, HTTPS, SSL certificates, and that's going to route requests based on the URL that we visit, right? If you've ever set up Nginx, this is basically that, but you get to configure it through the UI. So let's go ahead and do it. Again, search, load balancing, there it is. And, you know, if you've ever filled out payment forms, government forms, these forms are generally something along the lines of government forms, quite lengthy and a lot of things to select from. However, it's a little bit more fun. So create a new load balancer, HTTPS load balancing. That is what we want. We want to start configuring from internet to my VMs. Yep, that is exactly what I want, from the outside into my little GCP project. Let's call it. So we'll say vite. Yeah, I already had a good name for it here. So vite site LB. So LB for load balancer. Generally, just prefix your load or postfix your load balancers with LB. I think that's the general convention. So backend services and backend buckets. To where do we want to route our traffic? Right in here, I already have two services that have been set up from a previous test attempt, essentially, but we're gonna go ahead and set up some new ones. So create a backend bucket. Let's go ahead and say vite site bucket. For me, I will just prefix it with 1. And here you will browse your buckets, find your Vite client app, and select it. So this is where you come to a breaking point of why do you want your app in a bucket and not served from what's called from the Cloud Run? The reason is CDN. So CDN is Content Distributed Network. If you ever heard of Cloudflare, it's essentially a global cache. So you will reduce if your site comes under big load, so a lot of people are visiting your site, a global caching will reduce the amount of traffic. And with Google, not just Google, general cloud infrastructure, what happens is you tend to pay for internet traffic. So if you have a lot of internet traffic, this might save you a lot of money. And fair warning, if you're setting this up, load balancer will cost around $18 a month, I think. So if you're just testing, make sure you delete after. But if you set up a production site, just be aware of the costs. So anyway, CDN is a deal breaker here. This is something that you might want to have enabled. We're not going to enable it because it costs extra money. I actually don't know if it costs extra money. It just sounds like it would, right? So anyway, the rest of the settings, you don't need to worry about anything, right? So let's create it. This is what we want, vite site bucket 1. Now, this is the bucket backend. So this is a backend is somewhere where we can route traffic to. So you can have multiple ones of these, right? It's a checklist selection, multi-select box, whatever. Create a backend service. Now we want this. So this will be our Cloud Run container. I'll call it 1 again, just copying the name. What kind of backend is it? So there's many types of backends that you can route your traffic to. In our case, it's going to be serverless Cloud Run. Let's select that. I'm not going to go over all other potential infrastructure that you're going to have. It's a whole other video. So yeah, backends, network backends. Again, this is something that I had set up here previously. Let's go ahead and create a serverless network backend group. Here we will, again, I'll just Cloud Run neg-1, neg for network endpoint group. And then we select Google Cloud Run, select the .NET Vite group. And the reason it's called a group is when we've created Cloud Run, you've seen the total amount of instances that it can scale up to. If you think of the instances, right, they're just running around in the field. We need sort of a thing that we can hit in order to be able to reference all of these things running around in the field. So rather we just bunch them up and put them in the box. And anytime we just put a request into the box, and one of the instances in this group handles the request. And this is kind of what this is. We're basically gathering down a group, and we're making sure that we're hitting the same instance group all the time. That's that. We've region again. Just make sure you select the correct region. Create, right, and we're just going to use this. Done. Again, you can enable CDN here for this will mostly work for like static content. So if you're Cloud Run again serving static content, you can cache that. So that's set up. You don't need to touch any of the advanced stuff. This is about as much as you need. Again, we're not setting up HTTPS. If you want to explore that on your own, please do. Let's go ahead, create this, and there's our Cloud Run container 1. Let's go ahead, press OK. And here we essentially have two backend services, backend service and backend bucket. So we have two backends. So let's go into host and path rules. So here you can have advanced path rules. We're not going to go into these. These are going to be more simple ones. This is kind of like the Nginx config, where you're saying, if we match this path pattern, go here, right? And if we match this path pattern for this website, go here. All right. The default is the bucket. Okay. For now, I will put 00 here, and then we're going to go /API everything, right? Because all the convention is all of our routes are prefixed with API. Again, for the subdomain, if you have something like this, right, this is why you might not need API, and then you can just have something like this. All requests that come under api.example.com, just go put them to the actual API instance. In our case, it's not the case, right? We are on the same domain, so that is what we want to do. So 000 here is basically just a placeholder. Backend is where our two services live. This is where traffic is eventually going to get resolved to. It's essentially in direction, and here we're basically configuring pointers. If routes are pointing to this place, go to the bucket. If they're pointing to that place, go to the Cloud Run service, right? So these pointers have to be attempted to be accessed from the front end, right? This is what the public internet is going to try to hit. So front end configuration, let's just call it vite site front end. Protocol, HTTP. Again, if you want, you can go through HTTPS setup. You can create certificates, much like we've just created groups. You can just create them right here, right? It's super easy to do all of this stuff. I'm just going for a more straightforward setup. So HTTP, I'm going to select standard network. Again, the premium costs a little bit more, and I am using the same region across all of my backends. So that's US Central one. Ephemeral right here basically means that the IP is going to be interchanging. It's going to change at some point. You might not want that. We're going to go ahead and create an IP. Again, a vite site IP. I'm going to go ahead and reserve that. Okay, so that's there, port 80, and we're done. Cool, review and finalize. Can take a look. This is kind of like what it looks like, and create, right? If you've forgotten any steps, go ahead and rewatch. Here we are. Took a little bit of time to set up. Go ahead, click into your load balancer. We want to find the front end IP because that's what we're going to hit. Let's go ahead and copy this, paste this into a new tab, and we're going to see something like this. So this are basically us trying to hit our API test. So let's go ahead and hit it manually, and we'll see that it basically gives us this XML error that there is no such key. Otherwise, if we go to normal site, it's working. It's working fine. So what's the problem? The problem is this thing that we've configured here. So the 0000. This routing, it's not really a domain routing, and that's basically what we want to change here. We want to make it route to the correct place. So let's go ahead and change this configuration. I guess once you would have set it up with a real domain, you would actually use that from the initial setup. Or you can even set up this IP from initially before you use it and know it then. Okay. Otherwise, let's go ahead and edit. Let's go to host and path rules. Let's remove these IPs here and let's put these in. So if you're wondering what's this that has been created, again, because we've set up this rule, we're basically accepting requests from this domain, and this automatically gets populated to kind of say, right, anything else from this domain, just go ahead and put it there. Okay, so that's that. Let's go ahead and update it. So that's done now. After basically maybe 5 seconds or something, you might see these IPs change, and that's good. You might come back to your site and it might not work for a little bit, but basically give it 5 minutes and there we go, right? It works. So basically what happens are the requests for API test get routed to the container, and requests for all the other requests really get routed to the bucket. So that's that. Again, you can test /API/test. This basically reaches this same endpoint, and yeah, it's a working app. Again, you can enable CDN in this solution. So if you're hosting a lot of images and whatnot, you can leverage the really powerful caching that Google Cloud has. All right, this will be it for this video. I'm gonna leave some documentation and essentially guides that you should really follow if you're setting this up just for a single static site. Yeah, just information in the description, a bunch of other links in the description. Join the Discord server. If you have any questions, make sure to ask them in the comment section or on my Discord server. Have a good day and see you in my other videos.